Hello everyone and welcome back to the History of Video Gaming. My name is Ben. Joining with me as always is Wes. How are you, Wes?
I'm doing great, Ben. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. I feel like a big weight has been relieved from my shoulders. We're at 76.
Yeah.
So before we got a lot to talk about, so before I get into 76 at all, let's get into what games we've been playing real quick. What have you been up to, Wes?
Well, I was just, since we do have a lot of good stuff to talk about today, going to give a bit of a highlight of what's to come in our next episode. I just, a while ago, pre-ordered for release day shipping Pokemon Sword because I'm so sure I'm going to like it. I just got it, and I'm going to be playing that, hopefully, assuming shipping and everything, I click the right buttons this Friday coming up when it comes out. So I'm super hyped for that. Expect for me to be nonstop talking about Pokemon next time we talk about games. It's going to be fantastic, and I love it. But do you want to give us a update on what you've been doing?
Yeah, Planet Zoo came out. I've been playing that a little bit. I haven't had a lot of free time this past weekend because I've been getting ready for 76.
Because 76, yeah.
Yeah, but I've been playing it a little bit. It's awesome. It reminds me of a lot of Planet Coaster. And I've also been working on my custom game a little bit. Last Friday, I spent probably like 4 or 5 hours trying to figure out how to add a headshot into the game.
Oh, geez, yeah.
I was able to do it, but there was a lot of like weird bugs and issues I had. Like a headshot, like you can't really tell that you headshot somebody unless there's like a little sound effect of like a head popping or something, you know?
Right.
I was like, oh, I'll have this little sound, and like nothing was happening. So
oh, no.
Turns out that as soon as I had it set up so that as soon as someone died, the game object was destroyed. And if the game object was destroyed, there would be no sound because it was destroyed with the game object. So,
Oh, okay, because it's tied to the object. Right.
So normally for that, you have like a little death animation and can play during then, and then it's destroyed, right? But I didn't have time to do all that stuff. So right now it's just set up where you'll kill somebody and then they'll just stand there like a T pose for a second and then they'll die. I was like, hey, whatever. That's the current state of my game.
Hey, if you get the sounds and the headshots in there, it's worth it if they T-pose.
Yeah, I mean, you can one-shot somebody in the head right now, so.
Nice.
I guess it works. And I switched out the enemies instead of like these weird pill-looking capsule shapes and bandit sort of looking dude. Like,
yeah,
kind of like
so
a rust guy, but he kind of like runs weird. He runs like a zombie. It was just like the animation that came with him. But
considering you were coming from like a big yellow pole, that's kind of
it's
still an improvement.
He's got a head now. You know,
right?
You can one-shot him. Yeah, I mean it's going pretty good. But
nice.
Let's get into our special topic, which I think this is like one of my favorite special topics that we do.
It is, yeah. I love doing this. Yeah,
it's our favorite and least favorite games of the previous year, that being 1975. And we're going to start out with our least favorite. Do you have any guesses for my least favorite, Wes?
Oof. Well, that's tough because you told me just before we started that you had a hard time picking a least favorite.
Kind of true. I mean, I definitely had one.
Yeah.
But might be different from what you're thinking. Maybe it's what you're thinking. I don't know.
Did you go for pawn clones or did you leave them out totally?
Do not want to declassify.
Okay. I would say my guess for least favorite is Super Flipper. And what about mine? Do you have a guess for that? I'm
going to say Shark.
I cannot disclose whether you are right or wrong.
All right, why don't you reveal yours first, Wes? What did you actually pick for your favorite?
Well, so contrary to what you thought, my least favorite was actually Shark by US Billiards, which came out in November of 75 when we covered it. And, I forget how negative I was on this game when we reviewed it. I think I probably was pretty negative, but so it might not be a huge surprise. It's my least favorite. I do want to start out, not that whoever made Shark is going to listen to this podcast and get offended, but I really didn't like the game. Doesn't mean it's a horrible game, but something about it did not gel with me. I am like overly annoyed about the fact that the sharks are shaped like C's. It just bothers me. And I think just like the graphical elements, the gameplay elements, and like the way they all came together I was just like, this isn't fun. It's lame. And after I saw how cool the sharks were in Maneater, I was like, okay, well, that's even like, they could have done better than Seas.
Yeah.
And they could have done better than a weird maze that you had to get out of. And they could have done better than a bouncing dot that was a surfer or whatever it was. Like they, put like a sunken ship overlay with like some broken wooden walls that the maze actually looks like the sharks are navigating out of their lair or something. I'm fine with overlays, but it was overall just, I don't like it. It's no good.
Mm-hmm.
And that's all I got to say. But what about yours? What was your least favorite?
Well, before I say it, I've got a couple dishonorable mentions here.
Oh, yeah.
There were a couple driving games that I thought just did not work well. And I think you played them all. It was like, I wrote down here, Highway, Crash and Score, and Alley Rally.
Those were...
I just feel like... Yeah, the driving like wasn't good on them,
No, Crash and Score, I was definitely that was my tie for Shark, because that one was just like, ugh. And Highway, I remember not liking, but that might be because I played it further in the past that I was like, the wound had kind of healed,
Yeah. And then Alley Rally was my other one.
Yeah, that was also bad, but I just kind of like forgot about it, which is mean.
Yeah.
But like, that's why I
feel
didn't...
like with all of them, it felt like the actual road was like very small. The amount of like obstacles on the screen was like most of the screen.
yeah, especially Highway. It's just like all off-road, and then like this very hard to steer on highway with that weird steering technique they had for that game.
Yeah. So I thought of those ones, but my least favorite of the whole year was also Shark.
Oh, fantastic.
I just had to. It's just, it just looks bad. Like,
it does.
Graphically, it's not aesthetically pleasing at all. It just looks like a catch grab, I think. I think that's what it must have been.
Right.
To get in on
Jaws came out and they're like, oh shit, let's throw some stuff up here.
I just, right from the beginning, how small the maze is compared to the amount of blank space on the screen just does not make any sense in my mind.
And like unused blank space too. Like your sharks are up there like for a little bit of the game and going towards the swimmer, and that's about it.
It's just such a bad one. I was like, this has to be it. Like, no other game comes close to this.
Oh, good. I feel validated.
Yeah. I'm sorry I gave that one to you. Somewhat.
Well, then we get to talk about it in this episode, so worth it for that.
Let's move on to our favorites, because this is where I really get excited.
Yeah.
Thinking about favorites that you would pick, there's one that I really want you to pick. I don't know if you're going to pick it. But I really hope Moria is on there. Because similar to, what was the last one? It was Oregon Trail. Like, that was the one game that you played that I was like, I got to go back and play this game, because I had not done so at that point. And similarly, Moria is the one where I'm like, I have to go back and play this game, because the way Wes described it was just so cool.
Right.
I haven't done so yet, but I will. I definitely will. We had a lot of really great games the past year, so I don't know if it's going to make your top 3, but that's the one I want to make the top 3 the most.
Okay.
I really hope that's there. I think RPGs in general are probably likely to be there.
I think for both of us, they're likely to be there. Yeah.
Yeah. It could be Pet at 5, could be Gunfight. That's a very common one. And just solid game. Could be Maneater. That one really, I was like, oh yeah. I feel like Wes could pick that one. It's like, it's hard to forget about that one. So I was like, that could be it. I would say those are my kind of guesses, like Pet at 5, Moria, Gunfight, Maneater.
Okay.
I think that's probably where I'm thinking.
Yeah. Well, I'll have to save it. Let the anticipation build on whether you got any of those guesses right. So for me, I'm not sure which, but I know almost positively that you have an RPG on yours, which is a pretty safe guess with this list that we had over 75. I want to say Pet at 5 is going to make it just because of the historical significance of it. And also, I remember when I was scrolling back through the games you played, that just because you like it a lot, and I don't know if this would make the cut because we played a lot of good games, I'm hoping to see Drop Zone 4 on there.
I know. I was thinking about that one for a long time, Wes.
Yeah. So I think those are my guesses. I only got those 2 guesses for now. But do you want to start off, or you want me to get into it?
Actually, real quick before we start it off, I don't think this is going to be on your list, but one that I really want to be on your list is Steeplechase. But that's another one. I just feel like every time I think about 1975 games, like it's one of the first ones I think about, and I don't really know why because I don't think we reviewed it that well.
Yeah,
I was like, yeah.
No, I know what you mean though. When I was looking back through them, Steeplechase was one of the ones that stood out to me too because I'm like, I didn't like playing it that much, but the game itself is just kind of cool and iconic in this weird, like colorful horse racing game. Yeah, it is.
And I remember editing the episode of that one, and I forget if you mentioned it or not, but you definitely mentioned it. But there's that sound effect where it's like and I was like, I'm back in it, man.
Yeah, yeah, the bugle noise at like the very beginning of the race. Yeah.
So I don't think that one's going to be in, but I hope it is.
All right, you got a lot of hopes up here.
I know. Well, we have a lot of like underdogs this time. I'd say we've got a lot of big games and then a lot of underdogs.
Yeah, I'd say it's fair.
Why don't you start, Wes?
All right. Well, so for my third on the list of my 3 favorite games that I had for 75, you guessed right, and Pettit 5 is right on there by Rusty Rutherford.
Yeah.
And I put it on here for some of the reasons I mentioned that I think you might have it as well. It's debatably the first RPG on a computer, and like heavily D&D inspired, and it's just hugely relevant, I feel like, especially as a big RPG player myself, like hugely relevant to the history of video games. And also I really like the style that it had for being able to enter a dungeon, know your way back if you can backtrack, leave, and then get the cash. And there's like a lot of gameplay elements that worked really well for it, and also that worked really well for testing it in a short span of time, which kind of makes it complementary to the way that we look at games when we're doing this podcast. But I also just even like the name. Like I was even today talking about it when I was doing more research for the podcast. I was talking to my brother about Pettit 5 because I was explaining to him all the program naming stuff on the Play-Doh systems, and that's how that all these games got their names. And so, it's one of those ones that just like that knowledge is sticking with me because I was so excited to learn about it in the first place, and the game itself was actually pretty fun to play, even in 2019.
Definitely, I can understand.
Absolutely.
But I'm a little surprised it's not higher, to be honest.
Yeah,
but
well,
you played a lot of good games.
You'll have to wait and see, Ben. Yeah.
Going into my number 3. This one might surprise you a little bit, Wes.
Okay.
I chose a Maneater for number 3.
Ooh, okay, yeah.
And I want to clarify, like, I think Shark Jaws could have easily been there too, But Maneater, the sharks, like, I went back and watched a video, and the sharks are just moving so much faster. And the whole game feels like really intense, fast-paced, and on the edge of your seat. And I was like, first of all, you got sharks, you got, like, your diver guy, they look good, like, the sprites look good, the animation looks good, the cabinet is legendary.
Yeah.
It just has a lot of great things. The gameplay is a little simple, but it's very, very memorable and nostalgic, I would say. I would put Shark Jaws right there with it, but I thought with Shark Jaws, you just have the one shark, one guy on screen. It's not 2-player. It's a little bit, not as interesting and more boring, I think. Just looking at the screen, there's not as much going on.
Right.
So I was like, you know what? I'm going to give it to Maneater, even though you played it. But it's the one that I think about pretty often. I'm like, but that was just a cool one to go through.
Yeah, absolutely. It's got a lot of stuff going for it.
Yeah. We'll see if it still makes it on your top 2.
We'll have to see. But next up, we got my number 2, which a bit of a sleeper pick, and maybe the nonconformist in me is the reason I picked this. And it's Western Gun by Taito.
Really? Do you think that's like... I feel like it's almost an obvious one. It's so good. Okay. I mean, it's such a good one.
Well, I just mean with Gunfight up there,
Oh, I see. You didn't pick Gunfight. You pick Western Gun. I see.
Yeah.
Okay.
So now you can limit down your number 1, but for me. But yeah, I was choosing between those two in my mind. I picked Western Gun instead. And looking at it like objectively and for relevance in history, I feel like Gunfight's like the better game just because of the animation quality and some of the big jumps that they made. But there was just something about like the vibe that I got from Western Gun that I really liked. Part of it which I mentioned during my review, is that like the super cartoony like horse rapid clip clop noise whenever your cowboy moves is the best.
Yeah.
It's so ridiculous. And also I just like how they're like these little stout weird cowboys that you can tell they're cowboys, but they look super goofy.
They have a lot of charm.
They do, yeah. And also, while the graphics, or at least the like the individual sprites for the cowboys and all the stuff that Gunfight had were really good, I feel like the black background that Gunfight had took away something that Western Gun had with the I think it was a yellow overlay over the screen to make like a sandy background, along with the cacti and the rocks that were there that bullets would bounce off the rocks, and the cacti could take like 2 hits before they disappeared. There was just a lot of like weird, innovative, cool stuff that was buried in there. And it was just, I don't know, super fun. It had a lot of charm, the game. And it's just like weird in a way that I really liked.
I totally understand that. It definitely had a lot of like heart in it, I think. And
yeah.
On top of that, it was gameplay focused. Like the gameplay was solid.
Right, yeah,
which is not always the case. So
exactly. Well, I'm itching to know, Ben, what your number 2 is.
Well, hopefully I didn't give it away, but my number 2 is Gunfight.
Oh, okay.
Big way. I feel like part of this is just I didn't have that much experience with Western Gun. I basically just handed it off to you, and that's it.
Right. Yeah.
So, I was actually able to like play Gunfight in the and stuff. So that's kind of the reason why I picked it instead of Western Gun. But I feel like when it comes to a 2D shooting kind of game, it just like set the ground for everything. Even though Western Gun came before, I think it was really Gunfight, which was the one that really popularized that style of gameplay.
Yeah, and they're so different too for being basically like conversions of the other. Like Gunfight really takes it to a whole different level.
Right, yeah. I mean, it was the first with the microprocessor, so like the history is like there as well. The gameplay is still really, really solid. Even though like the graphics aren't as nice looking or interesting, I think it achieved like a very clean sort of graphic style, which I kind of thought was nice.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it used the whole screen well, and I really enjoyed that. So, I think it's just that's another trash on Shark. Yeah.
I was about to say that was a direct punch on Shark. Yeah.
So it's just a good game, and I don't know. I don't think it has many like negatives, honestly, that I can think of. Even the sound was good. I mean,
yeah. Just stylistically, I liked Western Gun better, and I decided to only choose one of those because I mean, both definitely could have made the list. But yeah, it's got so much going for it.
They both did make the list.
They did. There you go.
Let's go to number 1. God, I hope it's Moria. If it's not Moria, I'm going to be angry, Wes. No.
Well, Ben, get ready to be happy because it's Moria.
Hell yeah!
What
I'm talking about.
Just a reminder by Kevin Duncombe and Jim Batten. And it was tough for me. I mean, I knew after all the stuff that we played in 75, because I'm an RPG fan, and we played like these Origin RPGs, I knew an RPG was going to be number 1. Mm-hmm. But choosing between this and Petit 5 was a little tough.
Yeah.
I think Petit 5, when I played it for like, I usually play games for like 30 minutes or like maybe an hour, depending on a game for the podcast. And Petit 5 is a lot easier to be like, okay, do it in a short thing. I understand what the game is and I had fun with it and I can get out. And Moria, I didn't necessarily like the whole time I was playing it have a ton of fun because of how difficult the mapping is and everything, but just everything about it is so cool. And the amount of detail that's in it, it's like if I was into it and really dedicated and played it for hours and hours, I know I would just like continue to find new stuff and continue to love it.
Exactly.
And I think that's probably how I got you hyped, because I know I was that hyped when I was describing it, when I was reviewing it too, because it's just like Petit 5 is like, okay, here's an RPG on a computer. Moria's like, yeah, but what if we added like all of this stuff? Like haggling and trading and like 4 different armor slots and different weapon types and equipment and 4 dungeons and a gigantic wilderness area to explore that you have to go through to get to each of the dungeons. And just like all that makes it awesome, even though I know I talked about during the review that the lack of like a real map and the no real like visual interest made it kind of difficult to play for long sittings, but just the amount of stuff in it, like there's no way. At once I thought about it for a bit, I had to put Moria number one. Just like
Awesome.
the statistical information that gave you, the variety of options in combat, the fact that it was semi-turn based because of this weird thing I don't understand about the Plato system where it kind of like kept time. It's awesome.
The fact that your character got old.
That's right. I forgot about that. You live to like 100. Yeah. It just, yeah, all these things. And I know we'd said this for other genres too, where you're like, oh, you're thinking in your head, okay, maybe like in the 80s or the 90s is when all these like gameplay features start to get added to the genre. And Moria's just like, no, they're all here. We just need to like make them better.
Yeah, exactly. I feel like Pettit 5, it was simple but like awesome, and then this one was like this. If the graphics were a little bit better and you had a mini map, like it could be from like 1985, and I'd be like, yeah, right. It basically has everything you need. Yeah, it's like, all there.
Feature and gameplay wise, it's just like the map and the visuals that like keep you out of it. But like you could play it today and be like, yeah, this is fun if it had like better graphics and a better mapping system. Yeah, it's right. It's nuts.
It just is like so modern, I feel, compared to these other games.
Yeah, definitely. But yeah, so that's it. You guessed right. Your hopes and dreams were met, and I'm getting feeling a little dicey that Drop Zone's going to be on your list. So why don't you let me know what your number one is?
Number one, it's not Drop Zone 4. I was thinking about it, but I was like, you know what? It's probably my favorite looking game of all year, because of that gradient sky. I mean, it really looked good.
Right.
But the gameplay was not great. So I was like, I just couldn't force myself to do it.
And there was so much good stuff in 75.
Yeah. I also want to mention real quick before I do my number one, my favorite home console, because we didn't include any home consoles. They're obviously like behind where the other games are. So I kind of figured we weren't going to say anything, but if you're going to go back and play one of these, I would definitely recommend the Video Sport by First Dimension. To me, it's almost a next generation sort of console and is a lot more reminiscent of what we're going to see here in 76. So it was definitely ahead of its time, and you should just check it out. It's the best Pong console of 75, in my opinion.
Yeah, awesome.
So yeah, my number one, I mean, obviously it's an RPG, right?
Oh yeah.
It had to be Pettit 5.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, there's something just so nostalgic about Pettit 5, and even though I played Orthink, Orthink 1, right? No, that was Pettit 5.
Yeah, Orthink is Orthink, which is confusing.
Okay,
we're talking about the emulator that we use to run this and the codes that they use for it. The game's called Orthink, but
yeah, so even though I played Orthink, which is supposed to be the next sort of step of Pettit 5,
right,
it lost some of Pettit 5's charm in a weird way. Where, I don't know, Pettit 5, it just had all the core mechanics of a dungeon crawler that you need. The combat was like the one thing was kind of lacking in, but I loved the fact that you could just exit and you could grind if you wanted to, or if you wanted to just play it risky, you could do that. I remember before handing it off to you, I had some concerns, and you're like, oh, I found the stats page. I found this. And I was like, it has all this stuff. Like, that's insane.
Yeah, just digging in the help menus, and I found it all. But
yeah, so it ended up being a lot more robust, I think, than I originally thought it was going to be. And I was like, wow, this is, I mean, considering we were from a point of this didn't exist at all, to we've got an RPG, in 3 months or something. I was like, oh my God.
Right. Yeah.
And it's all because of Pettit 5. I mean, none of the other RPGs, including Moria, would have happened, I think, unless Pettit 5 was there. So
yeah,
I was like, man, I have to put it down. I mean, I think it's probably one of the best looking ones as well of all the RPGs.
Yeah. So, I mean, just the way it did. Considering all of them were using that black background with like the orange wireframe graphics, the way that it did that worked really well for it because of all the images and the top down. You didn't have to get too complicated, but you still knew like where everything was and all that.
I mean, just like with the other games, part of the screen was shared with stats and stuff, but on Pettit 5, it was really the whole screen, right? That was like graphics.
Right.
So
yeah,
you got to see some, I think, a little bit higher quality sprites because they had those, more pixels and stuff to work with.
Yeah.
So I love that one. So I had to do Pet at 5. So
It's great.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm glad if I couldn't put it number 1 that you were able to.
yeah. Yeah, that's our 75 list. I think overall, I couldn't really find that many bad games other than Shark. So there was definitely a lot of like Pong stuff that was not really memorable, but the ones that were unique and did things for the first time were always like exciting, I think. So yeah. Here's to 76, Wes. And why don't we take a break and then I'll talk about that a little bit more when we get back.
All right. Sounds good.
Hello and welcome back from that amazing music that we just heard.
Just beautiful.
Just beautiful, yeah. Let's get into 1976. Now, this was a big year. I mean, just in terms of volume.
Yeah.
Because I want to say for 1974, I had about 90 games, I want to say. 75, I think, was like 150. And this year was over 400. It was like 430.
Geez.
We're not going to be, by the way, we're not going to be covering all those. You'll see why it was so much at the end of the year, but it's basically consoles and they're all clones, so we just kind of grouped them. But I was like, it took a long time, okay? I was away, took a long time.
Yeah.
But like in every sort of session of research I do, I kind of want to remind people about what we're including on the list, what we're not. Like always, electromechanical games, we're staying away from those. But I have a couple additions this time that I think usually would have been included years past. So I kind of want to go over those quick and why I left them out. First are clones and ports of like basic games, like the basic 101 games, for instance, and also games like Tic-Tac-Toe and what else, like Hammurabi. It's like I don't want to cover these again. The reason that they're coming up in my research is because there's new computers coming out and a lot of people are just rewriting those games for those computers.
Right.
So unless there's like additions being added, I'm just not going to even talk about them because I just think it's kind of a waste of time at this point. So we're not going to cover those unless there are additions to gameplay, and I will check for that in my research. So don't worry about it. If there's some like big thing, we'll tell you. And then, as always, if I only have a single source for some games, I don't include them on the list. I think that was the same as last year, but I want to reiterate that. I saw quite a lot of stuff on a couple websites, and even some, like I saw like a single news article that would say, hey, this is a game coming out soon, pre-order or whatever. But there was no evidence that it actually came out, So I was like, well, what if they advertised it and they just didn't come out with it,
Right. Yeah.
So I was like, unless there was some evidence of things existing, aka multiple sources saying this was a thing, I'm just not going to include it for, lack of information. And then the final one, probably the most controversial one, is programmable calculator games. Now this one, I think we're going to do a special topic on programmable calculators because I have no clue what they are, really. They seem like almost mini computers, but even more like, I don't know. They're not like calculators today. So, but people made games for them. Most of the games just have a description or like the programming code. That's all.
Right.
So it'd be really hard to talk about them in general, but I think a couple episodes I mentioned a great documentary by a guy named Ahoy on YouTube, and he actually covered this when I was doing my research, and I was like, you know what? Maybe this is the answer. And he basically kind of took it from the standpoint of, well, they're not really using digital display the same way a normal video game is. Like a normal video game, you've got like pixels or whatever, and you can make whatever you want on that screen using those pixels, but a programmable calculator is really limited as to what it can display. It can only really display digits or numbers or parts of numbers. So you could make games out of numbers, like ASCII style or something, but it's not really the same. So I kind of use that to kind of like say, hey, this is one of the reasons why we're not going to do this. But I think just the amount of research just in this topic is quite scary. So I was like, you know what? I'm just not even going to touch it.
Sounds good to me.
Yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, they're not going to be games that are like breaking any barriers, you know? It's not like the most exciting games of 76 are going to be released on that sort of platform. So why even bother? I don't know. That's just my thinking right now. Obviously, the more games that come out every year, the more we're going to have to be kind of restricted as to what we're going to be talking about because we only have so much time. We are dedicated to being in depth and we will research things in depth, but in this case, I just felt like I didn't understand this enough to really feel like I could include it. So take it for what you will. We probably will talk about it again and maybe go into it later in a special topic down the line, but for right now on our timeline it's not being included. So
yeah, and we don't need to unnecessarily bump that list up from 450-ish to 600 games right off the bat.
Yeah, I don't think it was that many. But even the documentation on what the heck this is, like what is a programmable calculator, like I couldn't find out. So
weird.
You know, it was similar to like reading about the microprocessor. You know, it was like there's information, but I have no idea what they're talking about.
Right, and you have to dig in so deep just to be able to get like a basic understanding.
Yeah, so I don't think when people think of old video games, they're thinking about calculators. So it's like, you know, it's probably fine. But yeah, we will probably talk about it again in the future. But I just wanted to put that out there right at the beginning. So without further ado, let's get into 76. This is by far the year that's going to have the best games that we've ever played on our timeline, without a doubt in my mind. So I'm super excited. This episode, I think, is a little light. It starts off a little light here in early 76, but I would say that your first game, Wes, is actually the one I'm most interested in. So why don't you start us off?
All right. Well, let me get into the game that I covered first and one that I got to play. And it was Panther by John Hefeli, I think is probably how you say his name. This one actually might have been in 75, but we didn't add it. So we had forgotten to add it to that section.
Yeah, I actually wrote in my note that I just forgot it because I definitely looked it up last year. I was like looking through my Play-Doh games this year and I was like, wait a minute, wasn't Panther like, didn't I already do that? I was like looking through this, I was like, holy crap, I didn't do that somehow. So I think it was probably 75. Yeah, sorry about that. It's the only retcon for all of last year. So
yeah, we're doing pretty good. But either way, we're going to be covering it now, and it's a tank combat game called Panther because it's named after the Panther tank, and it's written using the Tudor programming language for the Play-Doh system. And this one, it's got a lot of stuff going on, and I feel like I just got to jump right into it with what the gameplay was to give you an idea of Play-Doh system games as we've seen can be super simple or very complex, and this is on the very complex end of it.
Oh god.
So this is a multiplayer game where your objective is to kill other players and kill the other team's base. There are 2 teams, squares and triangles, and 5 players on each team. Yeah, it's weird because squares and triangles are the name of each team, but I think your tank actually might look like a tank to another player. I was not able to ever find another player, unfortunately, and I couldn't find a picture online of somebody else attacking another player, so I can't confirm. You might have just been a triangle. Most of the graphics in this game were pretty simple, so I wouldn't be surprised if they were. But when you load up the game, there is a nice intro screen that has a sort of wireframe version of a tank that looks pretty good. So it's also possible they might have been able to do something with it. Not too sure about that. But the basic layout is you're in a, I want to say, 8 kilometer by 8 kilometer map that consists of 5 mountains and 2 bases, which have randomly generated locations. The mountains all have names, but I don't remember them all. And the mountains also change size based on the random generation. So sometimes one mountain will be like gigantic, taking up a quarter of the map. Sometimes they'll be really tiny, and they're usually dotted in between the 2 bases. And there's just a lot of options for how you can play this game. You can use a range function to determine the range of your target before you take your shot, as long as you know the maximum range of your tank cannon. And the further your distance away, the lower your chance to hit. And there's a linear scaling of the closer you get, the higher your percentage is. And one successful hit kills an enemy tank. And let's see, there's a lot of stuff, so I'm trying to think where to attack it from. You can also
can you mind telling me about the graphics? Like how far, like what perspective is it in, and then how far away can you see somebody?
So it's first person. You don't see any of your tank, but you're first person in the tank. And you can see, I think they said from 3,000 meters away, you can see somebody.
Wow. Is it just like blank, or is there like, a tree or something? So
the whole background is similar orange, like wire and black wireframe graphics to what we've seen. And you can't see, the only things that show up are enemy vehicles, enemy base, your base, and the mountains. So perspective is incredibly hard to gauge in this. I did see someone else playing it online who had a better grasp of the controls than I did. And
okay, we can get into that.
yeah. And they were able to do different zoom functions to kind of gauge where they were and what direction they were heading. And there's also a map feature, which is pretty good, which I did figure out how to use, that shows you where you're going. But as far as spotting things, I was having a lot of trouble. And one other just basic gameplay element I wanted to mention, you can reload your fuel and your ammo, and also pick up minefields that you can deploy at your own base. And you can set up minefield choke points in between mountains or anywhere else on the map that will detonate depending on the speed of the enemy tank.
Oh, weird. I wonder if you can see them.
That, I know you can see them on the map once they've been destroyed, or if they're a friendly undestroyed mine.
I gotcha.
But I wasn't able to see, I was having a lot of, I feel like this is like when you're trying to play Space Sim. I was having a lot of difficulty figuring out how to even do anything. But so I didn't get a chance to see if you could see the mines or not. But let's get straight into my rating so I can give you an idea of what I've kind of been alluding to already. The graphics, I gave it a 2 out of 10. I think the good about this is just to start off, the title screen image of the tank is really cool. And also the overhead map view that it gives you is really good. The mountains are just like circles on the map, but it tells you where you are relative to your base and the other base. And then you can also hit a different information tab while you're in the map to see the orientation of your turret and your chassis as relative to the map. So
okay, cool.
Yeah, and it's typical tank movement, which I knew going in, but still threw me off that, your turret moves, but your tank doesn't move. You have to orient your chassis to your turret to move in the direction that you're aiming.
Right. In
tank control kind of ways. And I think each base also had a pretty good design. The bases that you had to blow up, they were just kind of like a rounded off bunker looking thing that had a couple different windows and a flag on the top that either had a square or triangle to identify each team. So they did a decent job making that visually interesting. And like I said, I couldn't really confirm whether or not the opposing tank model looked good because no one else was playing it. The emulator does have a setup so you can actually play online with people, but nobody was playing it now. The mountains are interesting because they're giant triangles, and that's it. And they change size as you get close to them, so they kind of give you a sense of scale. But either I wasn't figuring it out right, or the orientation was just super weird because I was getting closer to it, but I was I don't think I'm even aimed at this mountain. And that one might have just been on me. But so overall, there was a decent bit of good stuff to how they did the graphics, and I think also a first-person tank game, kind of what they thought was important with adding the bases and the mountains were pretty good, but it was still just really confusing to get a grasp of what was going on visually. For sound, that's a NA score because there aren't any sounds in this game. And for the gameplay, I gave it a 2 out of 10. Like a lot of the other early computer games, this has a problem that could be seen as a benefit if you're super into this type of game, where it's incredibly complicated. It's not easy to get into. If you were really interested in learning it, it would be super fun because you have so much that you can learn. There's a lot of different skills that you could develop. But for me, trying to just take a quick look at it, it's just all the tank controls. I was hitting all the buttons I thought it was telling me to, but I couldn't get my tank to stop.
Nice.
And there's probably a like 0 throttle button somewhere, but I couldn't figure it out. So at one point when I was seeking out the enemy base to at least try to shoot it to see what the shooting animation looked like, I just kind of went in circles and couldn't even see it at all. And the map was like, you're right next to it, but I couldn't find it anywhere. So that kind of made it a little bit rough for me, but I feel like it would really benefit from, say, playing it modern day and you had a group of 4 other people playing with you on Discord and you were playing tactically against other people. I could see that being pretty fun, especially if you started to get a good grasp of the controls. So it may have just been the setting and way that I was playing it that made it maybe a little less fun than it could have been. Not saying it would have been like a super stellar game with other people, but I could see how having that team play aspect to it could really bring up the gameplay a couple notches. And for the relevance, I gave it a 5 out of 10. There's some speculation, and by some speculation, I mean I read this on one site, and it kind of makes sense, but I'm not going to say it's confirmed, that this could have helped inspire a game that we're going to be looking at in 1980 called Battlezone by Atari. So at least taking that as a possibility, because it's a tank game, I thought that contributed to the relevance a little bit. And also I feel like just each time we see these Play-Doh system games use their visuals in a different way, whether it's like super successful or not, it's pretty relevant for like I don't know how to phrase it. I think that even though I didn't like the graphics of this, I think that the fact that they were doing something different and something interesting is like super relevant to the development of gameplays, or to video games, I mean.
Yeah, I feel like it's on the edge of like programming like maximum skill at this point, you know? It's like pushing the envelope a little bit.
Right, yeah. And even that, you know, like the giant triangle mountains weren't super interesting to me, but the fact that they like moved as you got closer to them and everything and like took up more and more of your screen is really cool. So there's a lot of good stuff in there that I think made it at least a very relevant game, even if it wasn't one that I like to play a lot. So overall, I gave it a 2.5 out of 10. Like I mentioned, the graphics and the gameplay weren't really doing it for me, but there's definitely like tons of interesting stuff in this. Like a lot of the Play-Doh and computer games that we're seeing now, there's just like so much depth to the information that they've put in this game and the amount of stuff you can do, which is awesome. It just makes it really hard to get in and play quick and have a good time, like a lot of things that we play modern day have.
Right.
So I'd be curious to see someone who, I'm also not, you know, like who doesn't like tanks. Tanks are awesome, but I'm not like a huge like love tanks kind of guy. So I'd be interested to see like people who really like playing World of Tanks now as their go-to game, if they would be able to like see some similarities in this very, very early multiplayer tank game, or like if they'd be more interested, or even if the controls would be more natural. I haven't played World of Tanks, so I'm not sure how complicated the control scheme is in that, but just an interesting way to look at it from a different perspective, I think.
Yeah.
But overall, just a super cool game, but not really one that stuck with me as something I wanted to hang out and play more.
Yeah, that makes sense. It sounds like the gameplay, right when you started talking about it, I was like, oh my god, is this like Space Sim? But it kind of has that, you know, hunting the other base and stuff vibe.
Right, yeah.
But at least it's on the ground.
Yeah, I had some
good
context of where I was, but
yeah. I also think it's interesting, the one-hit kill. I bet that makes it really tense.
Yeah, and it's just the percentage chance. I think, as far as, like I said, I never actually got into a fight, so I couldn't confirm that. But as far as what I was reading in the instructions, yeah, I could see that making it really tense. You have to be super strategic.
Yeah. Well, now that I think about it, percentage chance just makes me think of XCOM, like weird.
Right.
You know, 99, and then you're
hitting
like,
those 33s, yeah, and then missing the 99s.
So maybe not so much, but well, it sounds like an interesting one at the end, at any rate.
Yeah, absolutely. But let's get going into what you're covering for the beginning of 76.
Yeah, so we got 2 consoles right here, right at the beginning of 76. Actually, with both of these, I don't have an exact date. I just know sometime in 76, but they were so like basic looking. I was like, it had to have been like early. So the first one, both of these I didn't rate. I'm going to mention to you guys. The first one here is called the Orlek PP 2000. Apparently, the abbreviation PP is really common in these games. I don't know
seems
why.
like it.
But Diz just played 2 Pong style games at home. You've got your tennis game, which is an Odyssey style, so you can move 4 directions. And you also have a game called Pelote, which is a hole-in-wall type game where one person was the hole and the other person had to use their paddle to knock the ball in the hole. So I'm not quite sure exactly how that works, but it seemed okay. The reason I'm really not interested in this one is because, first of all, there's some screenshots and it doesn't look great, but there's no on-screen scoring and there's no sound. I'm like, how can you have no sound in 76?
Yeah.
I'm just not impressed by that.
It's getting to be pretty standard.
Yeah, I mean, we're going to see. It's going to be... I feel like it's already kind of standard, honestly. But, yeah, I was like, wow, that's kind of not really impressive. So that was Orlek. And then we also have one called the Philips Odyssey 200, which is just a EU release of the Odyssey 200 with nothing new. So just wanted to mention that happened, and it's by Philips, which, if you remember, they bought out Magnavox, even though Magnavox is still producing stuff with that name. So that's why it says Philips at the beginning. But yeah, in case you see, this is by Philips, but it says Odyssey. What's going on? It's it's the same. So just wanted to mention that.
Good to know. And to keep going with the consoles, we had some clones of the Epox TV Tennis, Electro Tennis. There were 2 different consoles. One was the Telepong, aka the Game Room Telepong by Entex, and the other was the Binatone or Binatone, I'm not sure, TV game unit. And both of these only played Pong, and they didn't have any score on them.
So you can see why I put them pretty early.
And both in the same category, yeah.
Yeah.
And next up, we have another console, which is very slightly more interesting. This one's the TV Ping Pong DN76 by EA, but it's not Electronic Arts.
I know. I was like, oh my god, is that them?
EA started with TV Pong in 76.
No.
But this is a German company who made this Pong console. Had an RF cable that it used to plug into, they claimed, any TV set. I'm sure any TV set at the time. The console itself was a black box and had just a white, it looks like plastic face on it that actually had a raised design of a game of Pong on the front, which is kind of cool. But other than that, on the front of it, there is only a slider for game speed and a speaker and an off-on button. That's about it. There's no physical scoring, like some of the ones that we've seen with the sliders for scoring. The controllers were plugged into the console, so they got something going there because they're not part of the console. But
Nice.
They were just these weird little squares that had a volume knob slider on it, like a mixer board slider. Yeah. And that's how you move the paddle vertically. So I don't think there was any horizontal movement for these. And the console itself only played 2-player Pong. The ball serve was automatic, and the sounds played at least when the player hit the ball, probably also when there was scoring. But there was no on-screen scoring, so you couldn't. You just had to count on your fingers, I guess.
Yeah.
And there was an image of what the gameplay looked for this, and it just looked not great. It's just solid white line, 2 solid things, and the image itself was jittery, which it could have been the console, also could have been the TV that was screenshotted. I'm not positive, but it didn't look fantastic.
Yeah, I definitely grouped some this collection of these are the worst consoles in my opinion of this year that I don't have dates for, so we'll just put them in the beginning.
Throw them all right here, yeah.
So yeah, they look a little sad, but that's not going to be the standard. Let's give ourselves some hope. But yeah, so TV Ping Pong by EA, and that's going to do it with consoles for today's episode. And we're going to move into some arcade games now. This next one I rated is called Demolition Derby by Chicago Coin. And if that sounds familiar, it's because it's a licensed version of Destruction Derby, which is a very similar name, by Exidy, which is actually a game that we really wanted to play, but we couldn't find any video or anything for. Whereas with this game, there is video for it. There's no emulation, but I was able to watch some people play. And is kind of an interesting one. The basic of it is it's 1 or 2 player game, and you've got a car, and there's like these AI controlled cars that kind of just randomly move around the map, and your goal is to basically run into them, and I think it's just 1 hit and they die. It could be 2 hits, I'm not sure, but you're basically just trying to hit the cars and crash as many as you can. You have unlimited life, so it's really just chasing these AIs down and crashing into them.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. Also, so there's 1 or 2 players. The first and second players' cars look a little different, and they both look different from the AI, so that's nice. But I would say graphically, it's again one of those situations where it really looks more like bugs on the screen than cars.
Right.
But, it's okay. The other cool thing is, so you've got the 2 AIs on the screen, but once you crash into one and it dies, it stays there on the screen as like a pile of rubble that is then becomes like a piece of...
like an obstacle?
Like an obstacle, yeah, exactly, that you have to try to outmaneuver, which in the later part of the game it can actually be problematic because you have 10 to 15 of these that you've killed and they're all laying around the screen. So kind of towards the end game, it kind of reminded me almost like Crash and what was it called? Crash and Score? Was that it?
Crash and Score? Yeah.
Yeah, so the screen can get definitely kind of busy at the end, but I thought it was cool that you started out with just basically 4 cars on the screen with nothing, and then at the end you've got the 4 cars, but you also have like a bunch of debris that is like, look at all the wreckage I did, it's kind of cool. Obviously, whenever an AI dies and becomes wreckage, a new one kind of pops in from one of the sides. So yeah, it's kind of a nice little game. You also have these 2, I don't really know what the purpose of them were, but you've got these 2 sort of out of bounds horizontal strips on the left and right side that the AI can go through, but you cannot. I'm not quite sure what the point of them is, other than just to give the AI maybe a chance to dodge you and stuff if they make it over there.
Hide from your vehicular slaughter.
Yeah. But it was all right. I mean, it made the screen look a little bit better, I think, just having some horizontal lines kind of putting everything in its place.
Right.
But other than that, you had a timer at the top, you had score and for each player, and that was it. So I would say overall, getting into my ratings, let's start graphically, because graphically it wasn't like fantastic, but I feel like some of it like was nice in relation to gameplay. Like I liked how the piles built up, the destruction piles.
Right.
And that the piles themselves look kind of like broken triangles, so it was like kind of actually looked like rubble a little bit. So I was like, all right, that's kind of cool. It was nice that you've got 3 different car models, for 1 player 2 AIs. That was cool. But it was in black and white with no overlay. And I was like, well, this is kind of, whatever. There's like, you've got your sprites moving like Grand Track 10 style, but that means there's no real animation for anything.
Right.
It's basically you hit a car, it immediately becomes rubble, that's it. So I just feel like it wasn't that advanced graphically compared to some of the stuff we've seen. So I would say the most important thing graphically is that it could have a lot of stuff going on at the screen at one time. And you had 2 moving AIs by themselves and 2 cars and rubble that persisted between deaths, which was cool. So I kept kind of going back and forth of what I was going to give it, but I ended up giving it a 2 out of 10 for graphics.
Cool. So, yeah.
I think that's right where it probably should be, because I feel like it had some things, and it was like it also kind of didn't have some things.
Right. Yeah.
I just think just even color could have made it really cool, but it was just black and white. So for sound, I gave it 2.5 out of 10. It has some decent sound. You basically have your engine noise. I would say the idling noise is actually the best sounding one. Like once you get up to full speed, you know how like the car hum kind of goes up in pitch, when you increase speed?
Yeah.
Like if you're at max speed for a while, it's like a high pitch that does not sound great. But idling sounds fine, and you're idling for a fair amount, because whenever you hit something, you go back down to 0, and there is a crash sound effect, which actually is really useful, because you could be just worried about yourself, and you can hear your opponent crashing into things, if you're playing 2-player, which is pretty cool, and getting points. So I liked how there was sort of an audio score indicator in that way. So I thought the sound was totally fine, passable. Maybe for like full speed, not the best, but it was definitely passable. I could have used like a little bit more, but nothing wrong with it. For gameplay, this again, I was kind of all over the place in my head with gameplay, but I ended up giving it a 2 out of 10. Just kind of, standard run of the mill, just because I just feel like there's not too much here, and the actual driving of the gameplay, you did have a wheel peripheral, and I think you had like drive in reverse, stick shift thing.
Yeah.
But I think that's kind of it, and it just wasn't, it like didn't grab me at all. It kind of looked sad.
Yeah.
It's just like cars models that we've already seen, and you're just driving around similar to Grand Track 10 or other games that we've already seen. So just like, it didn't really grab me that much. I thought it was totally passable and everything that it did, but it really didn't go above and beyond in any way. Is
it kind of like an alley rally style it's sounding like, or?
Yeah, kind of like alley rally, except you're actually encouraged to hit the cars.
Right. Yes.
Actually reminds me a lot more of Crash and Score almost.
Okay.
But without the screen being so bad at the beginning. So I think it's more of like an improved version of that. And it's definitely improved from Crash and Score, but I feel like it just could have or should have had more, or at this point just being, it was definitely a game where you could figure out the entire game on one playthrough that lasted, 2.5 minutes or something. And it was like, okay, I've seen all that game can offer. And that's it, So it's not that it did that 2.5, 3 minutes bad, but that's kind of all there is. And so I couldn't really give it that high, but I couldn't give it too low either because it did what it did fine. So yeah, I don't know. Hopefully I'm not rating these too hard. What do you think, Wes? Does it sound like right?
I think you might be getting the same attitude or tone from me if I had reviewed that. I think you're probably right on the money with it.
Yeah. I feel like with the game, especially coming from our favorite games of 75, some of those games just like really wowed us,
Yeah, absolutely.
And so when we get to like Demolition Derby, it's like, I feel like I've almost seen it before,
Yeah,
even though crashing into stuff is new. And weirdly enough, crashing in didn't feel that satisfying either, because you're traveling at full speed and then you stop, and it's like you crashed in Highway or something, or you hit that obstacle and Crash and Score, and it's like, I kind of have to restart from zero again, but that was the point of the game. So it's kind of a strange thing too.
Right. Yeah. It kind of messes with the like feedback. Doesn't make you feel like you're supposed to be doing that. Yeah.
And there is no graphical sort of feedback to make it feel good. It's not like the screen shook for a second. It's literally just like you hit, your velocity goes to zero, and a pile pops up on the screen, and you get a little sound effect, and that's it. So yeah, I don't know. It's probably a forgettable one, I would say.
Wow, calling it early for 76.
Well, see, I've got the advantage of having reviewed like 400 games this like past
That's
2
true.
days. So.
Yeah, you know what's coming up.
Coming. Yeah. And let me tell you what, it's gonna be awesome.
Oh, I'm already getting excited.
Yeah.
What was your
no idea, dude?
Did you say your overall for that one?
Actually, I have to give relevance first, which was 6.5 out of 10. The reason why it's so high is because I know what game is coming next from basically the same company, same sort of game, and that one's going to be really interesting to talk about.
Okay, I think that one I might already have an idea of what it is, yeah.
I think you do too. So that's the reason it's rated high. It was originally by Exidy, like I mentioned, and then it actually sold so well, I think, that they couldn't keep up with demand, so they licensed it out to Chicago Coin. But weirdly enough, I think Chicago Coin signed the contract heavily in their favor, and they couldn't make it anymore. Like, they couldn't make Destruction Derby anymore.
Oh, weird.
Exidy. So, and then Chicago Coin went out of business, which we'll talk about later. So it's kind of like this weird weird set of events, but yeah, it is kind of an interesting one in history, I'd say. So 6.5 out of 10, and that gives me my overall score out of 10 at 3.25, which is a little higher than I kind of thought. But you know what? It's not like it did anything bad. It's just it didn't do anything great, and so I think that's probably where it should be. So yeah, 3.5 out of 10.
Well, very interesting.
I'm sorry, 3.25 out of 10. Yeah, I'm not gonna let it get the extra.
Those extra 025.
Yeah, let's go on to the one you did, Wes, because I feel like this is probably going to be similar to my last one, but we'll see.
Well, maybe we'll have to see. I can't give it away too early. I'll just get straight into it. So I covered Ace by Allied Leisure, which came out in January of '76, and this is a dogfighting game created by Allied Leisure, which is similar to Atari's Jet Fighter that came out in '75, and possibly similar to Biplane by Fun Games. I think that was an honorable mention, not one that we took an in-depth look at.
Mm-hmm.
But the planes in Ace are like biplanes. That's the only reason I kind of made that association. Just as I like to do, giving you a funny quote from the flyer of how they were trying to sell this arcade cabinet. They said, "Ace, the 2-player video gun game, sure to be a triple asset to your location."
Oh, God.
Which is just very strange. I don't know. Maybe it's not translated, or it was written in another language, or maybe that's just how people talked in '76. I don't know.
Yeah. Oh, can I say real quick? I checked out Demolition Derby's cabinet because I was like, you know what? Ali Rally had a really cool cabinet. That was by X-City, I think. Yeah, that was by X-City. Yeah. I was like, this is coming from sort of X-City. It sucked. It looked terrible. It looked like basically like a flyer for Grand Track 10 or something, like kind of like the racing stripes.
Yeah.
But it's basically like white with like blue racing stripes. And I was like, really? That's all you could do?
Yeah.
And the big sort of graphic on the very front was like 2 cars kind of hitting each other, but I was like, come on. Really? I think Ace does a better job.
Yeah.
So, I just want to say that.
And I can get into that. Ace does have a pretty good looking cabinet. I only did see the front of it. I didn't take a look at the whole cabinet, but the main face of it was pretty appealing. They have like a pink and blue contrast, and there's a bunch of prop planes kind of duking it out on the front of it. So it's pretty sweet.
Yeah, that's pretty awesome.
Yeah, it's good.
I mean, I don't want to steal your thunder, but it had overlay too, which was like, it made it look kind of nice.
Right, yeah, on the sides and bottom to kind of give you the like area where you were fighting.
Yeah.
And so for the game itself, for the gameplay, it's a 2-player game. It looks like it was controlled with 2 joysticks each. One, I'm guessing, was throttle, and the other one, I think, was firing and steering. The game is pretty simple. You're just shooting other players to score points. When the time runs out, whoever has the most points wins. When you explode, you do have a respawn period, and you can shoot very quickly. They make the point in the flyer of saying that you don't have to wait for a shot to hit before firing again, which makes me feel like it's a direct thing of like, hey, Jet Fighter, you had to fire real slowly. Take a look at this game where you can fire really fast.
That's pretty cool, actually.
It is. It's nice. You can really kind of mash the button on it, or button because I was playing on a keyboard, but button also if you're playing on the joystick. And I couldn't really see, there's no timer indicator on the screen, which kind of sucked, but whoever had the top score at the end of the time wins, of course. And also the edges of the screens kill you, so don't fly into the edge of the screen. Unlike Pac-Man or any of the other games where you can kind of just wrap all the way around. This one you could not. So to get right into my ratings, the graphics I gave a 1.5 out of 10. The background is super bland. I think in the original game it was like a light blue overlay which made it kind of look like sky.
Mm-hmm.
But there's not too much going on. I didn't get a good look at the overlay on the cabinet, which might have given me a little bit of a higher rating for this. But the planes themselves actually do look really good. So I'm always back and forth once I get to these graphics ratings, but I'll stick with what I said for now because the planes do look good. They don't have any animation, but you can definitely tell it's a prop plane or like a biplane. And when you do loop the loops, it actually flips the sprite the other direction, so it actually looks like it's facing the right way and everything.
Nice. Cool.
Yeah, and the explosions also look really good from when you're either your bullets miss or when you shoot somebody down, there's like a little explosion. And there's actually a guy that parachutes once your plane gets shot. Which
I love that.
Yeah, it's super good. It's ridiculous, and he just floats all the way down to the bottom. And also, I noticed with the guy parachuting to the bottom, it's like an early game where they actually try to rationalize respawning in a game. Like you're always alive, I guess. You're always the same guy getting back in the plane. So that was kind of interesting. And the missile or bullets, whatever they were, look okay, but they blink in and out the whole time they travel, which makes it a little hard to follow their trajectory and see what's going on. Sound for this one, I couldn't rate because we couldn't find any clip that actually had sound in it. I think when we're looking at everything else that came out at the time, it's pretty likely that this had like an engine noise, an explosion sound, and maybe like a flying noise too.
Yeah.
But yeah, did you want to say a little bit about that? Or
Yeah, I just wanted to say that, this game is emulated, and we could play the emulation. And there's a lot of videos on it on like YouTube, but they're all from the emulated version. Like we couldn't find a version of the actual arcade cabinet. So
right. Yeah, and right when you boot the emulation, it says sound isn't working.
Yeah, so I'm fairly certain it had sound, but we just have to NA it because we couldn't find it, which I hate doing that, but someone needs to get on top of their, Ace machines. Because I think in order for it to be emulated, somebody had to have posted like the innards, of an actual arcade cabinet. So I feel like it's got to be out there, but we just couldn't find it.
Yeah. So unfortunately an NA for that, but like we said, there probably were sounds. Given the rest of the game, they were probably like, pretty good sounds, but who knows? They might have been great.
People listening can go and reference like Jet Fighter that we covered, because I'm pretty sure I put the sounds in that episode, which was the first boss fight episode. So
right.
If you want to hear what it probably sounded like, it was probably similar to that.
And so on to something that I can give a good rating on, which is gameplay. And this I actually bumped it higher than some of the other ones I was giving for this game, and I gave it a 2.5 out of 10.
All right.
I say higher, but it's not super high. And I actually thought the gameplay was pretty fun. The main detractor is just that it's super simple, but I think one of the main things that this has going for it is that it's super fast, and a lot faster than when I was watching videos of Jet Fighter than Jet Fighter was. Yeah. And so that kind of makes up for like the bad background in a way, or any of the other weirdness, because the turning on your plane to do flips is pretty tight. And I should mention this is from a horizontal view of a plane too, like ground to sky sideways instead of Jet Fighter where it was the top down. And also it just looks like you could maneuver around pretty well. And I was able to when I was playing the emulator. And it doesn't look like you have the issue of following each other in circles forever without hitting each other, but I'm not sure. You might have that issue. And it also seems like the quicker movement and firing speed would help if you did have that issue, because you kind of break off and get back in and actually fire at the opponent. And it's a small addition, but I actually think the quick respawn time is a nice feature that differentiates it from some other things. Instead of just like flashing and then getting right back in the fight, you have at least like a small breather in between each encounter, but it's also not so long that you feel like you're waiting a ton to get back into the gameplay.
What did you think of the use of the gas? Because I thought that was an interesting difference that I haven't really seen, where you could actually die if you didn't give gas.
See, I didn't run into that issue. And I don't know if I was playing it differently. I had different throttles where if I kept hitting the button, I would go faster or slower. But
I had it. If you didn't hit the button at all, you would eventually stop and like explode.
Interesting. I didn't encounter that, so I'm not sure.
I encountered it because I had a hard time figuring out the controls. Like I found them out for you, so you didn't have to figure them out. Mm-hmm. But when I was just like randomly hitting everything on my keyboard, like I would hit it once and he would start going, and then it would just explode. And I'd be like, what happened?
I should mention, I did figure out that there is one of my detractors from this game, a invisible box above the score that I do not know the boundaries of that kills you.
Well, maybe that was it.
And I'm guessing that's what I'm wondering, because I mean, that was my interpretation of it, but maybe it could be what you were saying as well. But I'm wondering if on the overlay there was like a mountain or something, or I hope there was, because I just flew near the score one time and just exploded.
Yeah.
So
could be.
I'm not sure. Yeah, it's hard to tell from what we played. It could be either one of those, but that's not going to make a huge difference in my scoring either way.
Mm-hmm. You did, though, after you hit the gas, you do slow down by yourself, right? Without you pressing anything.
I can't remember.
Or no?
I thought you maintained throttle, but I could be wrong.
Okay. I thought it was something where you would hit it and it would give like a bit of gas and then it would slow down and you would have to hit it again to go faster. But maybe there's 2 throttle buttons or something, that could definitely, I don't really know.
Yeah.
I didn't play it that much. I basically just tried to figure out what throttle was to tell you, and then I took it off my hands,
Right, yeah. So I'm going to go with that you maintained throttle. We could take a look back at it again too, but as I mentioned, I think either way that wouldn't affect my gameplay rating for this too much. So moving on to the relevance rating that I gave it a 4 out of 10. I like seeing that Allied Leisure is still in the game. I don't know why, but it's good to see that they're making stuff. But I don't think Ace itself is particularly relevant. I don't really think it made a huge impact on video game history, but I do think it improved on the type of game that Jet Fighter was trying to be. So I like its relevance, at least from that standpoint.
Yeah, I should mention there are a lot of these airplane games in 76 that we're going to go over. I don't know if Ace had anything to do with that, but I don't know.
That'll be interesting to see. Yeah, maybe we can give it a sort of retroactive bump in relevance if we feel like they're really Ace inspired.
Yeah, I feel like maybe it was just a fad at the time. So it could have just been a fad that this was a part of.
Right.
But we're going to see quite a lot of these actually for some reason.
Interesting. All right. And lots of comparison. And we'll have to see what the king of them is going to be for 76 because I don't know if it's going to be Ace.
Yeah.
So my overall for this, I gave it a 2.5 out of 10. I think the gameplay is actually really fun. And I think they did have a good feel for sort of, I mean, we use the term arcadey now, although this literally was an arcade game, but it had like that good arcadey fast shooting, get blown up, respawn, right back in it kind of feel, like fast scoring. And I feel like they did that really well, but the lackluster background and the bullets disappearing from like the constant screen refreshing, and I didn't really have an idea of how good the overlays were, although you did say they were pretty decent.
I think they had clouds.
Clouds,
I
okay.
Could be wrong.
Yeah, but I think it would have been nice to have sort of some indicator on the side of the screen, like, hey, if you fly off the screen, you're going to die.
Right. I don't think it had that.
Yeah. And also, like I said, I couldn't tell what was killing me at the bottom of the screen. But so overall, I think they did a pretty good job, and there are a few good elements of it, the gameplay being the best in my opinion, but not super great game.
Yeah. I mean, makes sense.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know if you said this, but I just want to mention that both Demolition Derby and Ace both came out in January of 76, and we know that for a fact. It's not just we put them up here at the beginning just because.
There you go. We're giving you hard dates now.
Yeah. January.
Of January.
So, yeah.
So let's get off to our next concrete date of January 76.
Oh, yeah.
An honorable mention. This is Avenger by Taito. It was a Japan release of Avenger by Electro, which was a shoot 'em up type game, but we don't really have any info other than that.
Which sucks because it sounds really awesome.
It does, yeah.
But yeah. And then we're going to move into our last sort of big topic for the episode here, which is the January and February issue of Creative Computing. We've talked about them before, and I kind of mentioned maybe we'd talk about them in the future, maybe we wouldn't, because some of these games aren't that important, and some of them are a little bit more interesting, I thought. This one has the most games of any issue that Creative Computing is going to release all year. So wow. I thought, you know what, let's probably talk about some of these. So the first one that it lists is Wumpus 2, which, Wes, I mean, come on.
It's Wumpus. Yeah.
This is what you've always been waiting for, right?
What's not like to like there?
It's basically the same game, except I want to say they did some like different AI stuff with like the bats, and the most important thing was you could choose between a list of caves. Like you had your classic, what was it, dodecahedron?
Dodecahedron, yeah. Gregory Yog loves dodecahedrons, yeah.
Yeah. You had that one still, but then you could also play like on a Mobius strip, which doesn't make any sense to me because that's basically a straight line. But you could play on that one. You could play like on a sort of pyramid looking thing. They had like 5 or 6 different ones. So that was the main innovation, I think. But I was like, it's kind of interesting.
Yeah, definitely worth mentioning.
Gregory Yob is still doing stuff, so
still loves those dodecahedrons, but now he's like, I know there's some Mobius strip fans out there, so we'll throw those in there.
I'm a big fan of Mobius strips, Wes.
There you go. Wumpus 2 was meant for you.
I don't think it would be that fun. A
Probably
Mobius
not,
strip is like a straight line, so I don't know. I don't really get that, but...
All right, and on to our next creative computing honorable mention is War 3 by Mike Foreman. And this was a trajectory battleship type game that was all text-based. And
more angles.
Yeah, kind of talking about angles, but not seeing angles. And the next one is Dr. Z. Not sure who the individual creator of this one is, but it was in that same issue. And it's some sort of dialogue story game that's meant to imitate what it's like to talk to a computer. Sounds very strange, but I'm curious.
Yeah, it's kind of weird because it had a sample run, and obviously I don't really know from the sample run if the questions they were asking the computer were like predetermined or if they were just actually asking them. But it was weird stuff. It was like, what do you think about having thought? And then the computer would be like, it's like this, It was like real strange.
It's like talking to Smarter Child on AOL Instant Messenger. Throwback.
Yeah. It was, I don't know. I feel like if someone's like, what would talking to computers be like 50 years from now? And just got it way wrong, like really weird.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was Dr. Z. We have another one here called Chase. This is one that we're going to come back to later because it actually got ported into Play-Doh in 77. So we're going to be talking about it more then. But it's a weird kind of chase game. I couldn't really tell exactly how it worked, but you've got like these walls around the screen. It's kind of like a maze, and I guess there's AI following you, and maybe whatever direction you go in, the AIs will all move that direction. So you're trying to get the AIs to bump into the walls themselves and destroy themselves.
Weird. So, okay.
Yeah, it sounds actually kind of cool, and we'll talk about it more next year, but I wanted to... This is where it sort of originates from, so that's by Bill Cotter. I don't know if I said that.
And the next one is also by Bill Cotter in that same issue, and this one's called Road Race. And this, you use acceleration, inertia, velocity, and math. I like that description. To drive a car on a highway before gas runs out. And
this one sounded terrible.
Yeah, I like your description at the end of that. Ben's note is, just shoot me now. So, at least not Ben's type of game, and when you throw math in there, I don't know if it'd be my type of game anyway either, but another entry in the interesting things that we see in the creative computing issues.
It just sounded like a physics problem, like one of those, you're going 50 miles an hour.
Right.
How slow do you need to slow down to make this turn, Like, that would have been terrible. So I didn't cover that one. But the last 2 games for the Creative Computing Company issue here, I did cover, mainly because I could play both of them physically.
Nice.
I could not replicate this stuff in like the basic emulator or whatever. So I decided to cover kind of 2 games together to give it some hope of not being terrible, because they're these are like mini games almost.
Right.
More for people, to try to teach people how to code than anything. So I kind of combined 2 games here to give it sort of the benefit of the doubt of like, oh, you're getting all these together, sort of, So the 2 games I did were Concentration, which was by Paul Coulter, and Condot, which is by Chuck Lund. And my impressions of these 2 games are very different. Concentration is... Do you remember that Match 2 game in Mario? It was like a little mini game, and it would be like mushroom, fire, flower, like 10, 20, 30 or something like that. Yeah. And you pick the 2 cards.
Oh, yeah. I know that the Concentration is what it's called, right? Like that's
is it? I don't even know.
They use it in other video games. They have that. I think it's... Well, but... Yeah, so I think it must have been a game before this that this guy probably, threw into creative computing. but
Oh, okay. Well, basically, it's the exact same thing, but in the creative computing issue here, he uses a deck of 52 cards,
ooh,
which is actually a little interesting because you're just trying to find pairs of any number, including like jacks and kings and stuff. So because there's 4 copies of a card, it's actually pretty easy to do at the beginning because the chance you just land on one of the other 3 copies is like decent, I think.
yeah,
So I tried to simulate this with a physical deck, and I think it was actually the hardest, like sort of midway through or a little bit more than halfway through, just because you would kind of find stuff out like real fast. Like if you memorize the first 4 cards, like the chances of you finding their pair in the next 10 cards are like pretty high for some reason. So it wasn't that hard, but at the same time I was playing through it and I was like, if I didn't have to be doing this right now, would I want to be doing this? Like I wasn't having that much fun. It's kind of like, okay, I'm concentrating. Is that fun? Not by itself.
right, yeah. The game of concentration.
Yeah. And then the other game is Condot, which I actually love. I don't know if you know this game, Wes. I found out it's actually called Dots and Boxes. But
sounds familiar. I don't think it doesn't. I don't know it though. I don't think.
I would play this game with like my brother at restaurants and stuff.
Okay.
As we're waiting for our food when I was growing up. But it's basically you've got like a 9x9 grid in this case of dots, and then you're drawing a line between 2 dots. And if you can encompass like a square, you get a point. You get like, you can like shade that square in, and that's yours, and you get to move again. So it's all about trying to be the first person to actually complete a square, because you don't want to be like the 3rd wall, because that means your opponent will then complete the square.
Right.
So I actually love this game, and having it on the computer is pretty cool. I mean, you could just draw it.
Right.
I would say a 9x9 grid is actually pretty large. It felt pretty large when I kind of drew one up quick, and I was like, this is actually quite a bit of dots. So maybe it'd be nice to have it on a computer,
right?
Because it's large. But I like love this game. This is like going back to my childhood.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, it's kind of like it sounds like sort of an amped up and more complicated tic-tac-toe, right? It's more strategy because you're.
Well, the thing about this game is it, like, things kind of domino really fast, because you'll be playing the whole game and nobody will be that 3rd wall, right? And you're going to do like the whole thing, and then all of a sudden, someone has to do it, and somebody, finishes off that box. Because they finish off their wall with the 4th wall of their box, they get to move again.
Right.
And because they did their wall, they can probably do the next one, and then they can do the next one. So you get these big, long chains happening. So
interesting.
It's pretty cool. I don't know how much real strategy there is. There's probably actually a decent bit of strategy, but if you know it, you're probably ruining the fun of the game. So, but I like this one, and that one really sold the score. So getting my ratings quick. Gameplay, I gave 3 out of 10 for these 2 games. That's really Condot's,
right.
doing that, just because I just think it's a great game, and not a lot of people know about it. It's kind of hard to talk about because you're talking about just dots and lines.
Right, right, yeah.
If you were over here, I could show you, and it'd be real fun. You just gotta trust me.
Okay, I believe you.
For graphics, I gave 1 out of 10. I mean, this is largely text-based. Even like the cards of 52, it was like K, for the king or something.
Right, yeah.
So I just gave 1 out of 10. It didn't look great. Condot looked as good as you needed it to look in order for it to actually be playable, but it didn't do anything more. So I was like, you know what, that's not really good. 0 out of 10 for sound, no sound. For relevance, I gave 4 out of 10. I kind of liked these games, and they were unique and new, but I don't think they really did much. So in terms of the history of gaming, I'm just kind of putting it there because I like Condot.
Yeah.
And I'm glad I got to play it. So overall, for those 2 games and sort of creative computing, the January-February issue in general, I gave 2 out of 10. A lot of these games are very simple, and some of them I would say are even like do not even touch, because you'll want to kill yourself.
Right.
but some of them are good. So yeah,
Yeah. I think that's kind of,
it's the best one, I think, and maybe Chase if you can get it running.
if you can figure it out, yeah.
Also, I want to say quick, I was reading on Wikipedia, they have a article called like war games history of video games or something like that, like a sub sort of genre.
Yeah.
And it lists War 3 as like the first one. And I was like, is it really? Like
Wasn't there a 1 and 2?
There was 1 and 2, and it came out in the basic games beforehand.
Weird.
But it specifically listed that one, like of all of them. And I was like, wow, so maybe that one is more popular
Maybe.
for some reason. But I was like, okay, sure. Maybe we'll just give that one a little extra special mention.
There you go. Yeah, it's extra special.
Yeah. And that's going to do it for us today, Wes. What do you think? I feel like 76 starts a little slow. Okay, just because a lot of these games, especially the ones with no date, I was like, just put them in the beginning.
I'll just throw them in here. Yeah.
So I would say if I don't have a date, every single other game that we're going to cover is better than these ones.
Ooh, wow.
But we did cover some January games that we definitely know were released in January, including Demolition Derby and Ace.
And interesting stuff, too, whether or not it was our favorite games of 76. We're yet to see that. It sounds like there's a lot of good stuff coming, but I think this is kind of a good primer, a touch of stuff that we've had in 75, and maybe getting into a little bit of new stuff that we can start to look forward to.
Yes. We will see. Consoles are a big thing in 75, and 76, and we'll talk about that when we get there. But we're going to start seeing games that have animation just like right out of the gate, and we're going to start seeing games that have color like right out of the gate.
Oh,
and
yeah.
Those are two like nice things. So
Yeah.
And I would say they're going to become normal in this year. So I'm really excited.
Thank goodness.
And yeah, it's been a while. And also there's a couple of games that are going to sneak up on us in 76 that are really going to surprise you, Wes. Like, how the heck is this in 76 is playing like a 1980 game, you know?
All right.
So I'm really excited. So hopefully you guys are too. We will be back next week for sure.
Yeah. Well, remember to check us out on our website. Yeah, it's going to be updated with more stuff soon. And also make sure to tweet at us, send us a message, or if you have any questions, or send us an email if you want to ask us anything about anything.
Oh, yeah. I think with that, we will be out of here.
Yeah. So thank you guys so much for joining us, and we'll see you all in the next one.
See you in the next one.